Hello, this is Ice Heels coming to you from the Republic Fleet, and today I'd like to talk to you about the utilities a Commando healer can use. So, the first big thing to think about is the fact that we are a hard casting healer. We have to channel 90% of our heals, so we are susceptible to interrupts like no other class. It really hurts us when someone interrupts our medical probe and everything else is on cooldown. There's not much we can do to counter this. Inside of our rotation, we have one counter for it already. As we build up our stacks and get our supercharged cell ready to be used, some people will purposely hold on to it and save it for when everything else is on cooldown. We'll get our medical probe interrupted, and you can pop your supercharged cell, and advanced medical probe is ready to go. And there's two more counters for it, two more counters against interrupts inside of our utilities that we can spec into. The first, and the one I find pretty useful nowadays, is reactive shield. And what happens is our reactive shield is combined with combat shield to make it to where our activation pushback is reduced by 30% while active, increases all healing received by 20% while active, and makes you immune to interrupts, again, while active. So while our reactive shield is active, combat shield makes it to where we cannot be interrupted, and our heals on ourself do a lot more. Now, this by itself is not good. It's a 2-minute cooldown on reactive shield, so every 2 minutes you get a 12-second window where you can chain cast stuff without being worried about interruption. But combined with reflexive shield, you get a pretty good combo. When you take damage, when you're spec'd into a reflexive shield, the active cooldown of reactive shield is reduced by 3 seconds. This effect cannot occur more than once every 1.5 seconds. So, this is extremely useful when you tack on combat shield. I use this for my trauma stabilizers, and what happens is, as a healer, I'm constantly focused, giving myself a lot of incoming damage. I pop my reactive shield the second I get attacked, and I continually take damage throughout. What happens is, every 30 to 45 seconds, due to reflexive shields cooldown reduction, I can pop reactive shield every 30 to 45 seconds. It's really, really fun, really useful. The second one that I loved in 4.0, and I think they've nerfed and I don't quite appreciate quite as much in this one, is supercharged defense. Activating supercharged cell increases your defense chance by 15% and grants immunity to interrupts for 8 seconds. From what I can recall of the way it was during 4.0, your interruption immunity lasted for the duration of your supercharged cell instead of just 8 seconds. So you could chain cast supercharged cell. You could do the supercharged cell roll that was famous back in the 2.0 era, and you would be immune to interrupts the entire time. So you wouldn't so much worry about capitalizing on advanced medical probe as just keeping those 10 stacks up as quickly as possible so that no one could interrupt you. Now this was a lot of fun, especially with the 15% damage reduction. I would do this for days. It was a little bit less effective for healing, but no one could interrupt you. It was really good in duels. A couple more utilities that are a lot of fun to spec into is there's a combo you can do with Tenacious Defense, where the cooldown of your knockback and your jet out, your propulsion round where you run away, and your stun break are all reduced. You would combine that with your efficient conversions, which takes the cost of those abilities away, and reflexive battery, which increases the damage dealt by your knockback. It heals you and 7 allies within range, and it works a little bit like reflexive shield, where every time you take damage, the cooldown on your knockback is reduced by 1 second. This occurs every 1.5 seconds. Your knockback already has a 26-second cooldown. With Tenacious Defense, it's reduced to a 21-second cooldown. As a healer, you're constantly taking damage, so this is pretty much up all the time. You can constantly knock people away. I would not spec into Concussive Force if you do this, because Concussion's charge knockback effect is stronger and pushes enemies 4 meters further away. And this is really nice, but conveniently a pain in the ass. What happens is you knock people away with this passive, and what happens is it places the Marauder or the Sentinel just within range, just far enough to where they can leap right back to you. If you if you use your knockback when this isn't active, it pushes them just out of melee range and not quite into their leap range. So it buys you a couple extra seconds. Another thing to spec into with this is Forced March. Forced March allows full auto and your successive treatment to be activated while moving. This is really good for mobility and kiting. And you combine that with Smokescreen, and you become a pain in the ass to chase around. How Smokescreen works is every time you use Propulsion Round, you generate a smokescreen, which keeps you from being leapt to or pulled, and making you immune to interrupts and ability activation pushbacks for the next 4 seconds. In addition, taking melee or tech damage within 4 seconds of previously using Propulsion Round refreshes its cooldown. So this can happen every 40 seconds, and that's pretty nice. Propulsion Round will jet you out about 20 meters. Someone pops a speed buff, someone does a roll and comes up and hits you, Propulsion Round activates again and you can go another 20 meters away. That's a lot of fun to use and is a very effective way of kiting people. I do not spec into this mobility and kiting. I like to spec into survivability. One thing I found extremely useful is paralytic combat stims. What happens is every time you are stunned, immobilized, knocked down, or otherwise incapacitated, which as a healer happens all the time, you recharge 20 energy. Additionally, when incapacitated, your tech ability deals 10% damage or healing. This is extremely helpful because all of my heals are tech heals. They're all tech abilities. So I get a 10% healing buff every time someone slows, roots, or stuns me. That's kind of nice. Another thing I love speccing into is overclock. With overclock, I can use some pretty nice burst heals. So I'll go ahead and get my supercharged cell up so I can show you how this works. But once I get up there, I'll get into my supercharged cell window and I'll pop Tech Override and I'll get off 2 extra instant heals for a combination of 4 total instant heals. So what I like to do is I'll use Backed Infusion for 1, Advanced Medical Probe with Emergency Response for a second, Supercharged Cell Window with Tech Override for 2 more Advanced Medical Probes. Now that's all stuff I can do while on the move and running, and those generally all crit. So that's a lot of healing going out, and it's very, very nice. I also spec into Reflexive Shield. The reason I do this is because being spec'd into Trauma Stabilizers, I really want my Reflexive Shield, or my Reactive Shield, to be up as much as possible. And so when I spec into Reflexive Shield, as we talked about earlier with the Combat Shield, Anytime I take damage, the active cooldown of my reactive shield is reduced by 3 seconds. And as a healer, I'm constantly being attacked, so it comes off of cooldown a lot. And combined with trauma stabilizers, which grant me a trauma stabilizer every time I am attacked in a direct damage attack, and these things will stack up 15 times. And what happens is, once my reactive shield expires, each stack of trauma stabilizers instantly heals you for 5% of your maximum health. That's 75% of your health. That's healed passively, not through any ability of yours, not through any hard cast, but through just your defensive wearing off. A really cool thing to do this with is when you have your reactive shield up and you generate those 15 stacks, you can turn off your reactive shield earlier if you feel you're going to die. So you can make that heal happen a little bit sooner by manually clicking it off of your buff bar. The third life the second life that I like to spec into is Adrenal Surge. Now, a lot of people might not spec into this, but I truly enjoy it because what happens is Adrenaline Rush gets buffed beyond amazing. When Adrenaline Rush triggers at and can heal you up to 70% of your maximum health. Additionally, it lasts for 2 more seconds and it heals twice as much each time it restores health. So effectively what happens is I'll get focused by a couple DPS, and instead of having to stop and heal myself and stay alive, I can keep healing my allies because I pop Adrenaline Rush, and anytime I fall below 70% health, it'll start healing me. And so for 12 seconds, I don't have to worry about healing myself. Adrenaline Rush does that for me. I just worry about healing my allies for those 12 seconds. The third life that I really enjoy and use, and something they've given us recently, is Echoing Deterrence. When you use Echoing Deterrence, you engage a defensive response system that absorbs all incoming direct single target damage for the next 6 seconds, reflecting 50% of the absorbed damage back at the attacker and healing you for 5% of your maximum health each time an attack is absorbed. And this is the best part. Can be used while stunned. Now as a healer, I drop below 25% and it's stun wars all over again. Everyone's stunning me, everyone's interrupting me. I become priority target number 1. Everyone wants to kill me when I drop below 25% health. I pop Echoing Deterrence. I reflect all the incoming damage and it heals me for 5%. It used to be 50, but because people are idiots and didn't read the tooltip, they freaked out about it and they had to go and nerf it. Now, an important thing to notice with trauma stabilizers and Echoing Deterrence is you are susceptible to AoE attacks. With trauma stabilizers, if it's a direct target attack, if you're the one in the portrait that they're attacking, it'll activate. But with Echoing Deterrence, all they got to do is ignore you and you won't heal. Or if they pop an AoE attack on top of you, it'll completely ignore your reflect and your heal and kill you. So if they ignore you, you got 6 seconds to heal yourself up. Another 2-3 heals to get yourself okay. If they start popping AoEs, you're in trouble. I don't know what people's issues are. I guess English is a hard language to read, but people obviously couldn't read, and they complained, and BioWare went and took the nerf hammer to it. There's a couple other utilities that are a lot of fun to spec into. I've used them on and off over the years, but they're not something I consistently use. One of these is Advance the Line. Increases the duration of Hold the Line by 4 seconds. Now Hold the Line has had its heyday. Back in the day, your set bonus would give you a lowered cooldown time for Hold the Line. You toss in 10-second duration instead of 6, where no one can root you or slow you or knock you back, it was one hell of a thing for hut ball or any time you were running away. Another one I really enjoy, but I am not spec'd into currently, is shock absorbers. Shock absorbers would be a great thing to use for two distinct different reasons. First, it reduces all damage taken from area effect abilities by 30%. This is a passive damage reduction ability. In a game where I am susceptible to AoE damage because of my reliance on echoing deterrence and the trauma stabilizers on my reactive shield, that 30% damage reduction on AoEs could come in rather handy. Also, what happens is, as a healer, I'm either being ignored and they're trying to stun me and focus down an ally, or they're trying to stun me and kill me. Either way, I'm getting stunned a lot. So the second part of shock absorbers is very useful as a healer, which is, additionally, while stunned, you take 30% less damage from all sources. Another one I find a lot of fun, but not exactly the most useful in its tier, is one-man army. What you do is you are stuck and dependent upon the minute and 20-second cooldown on your electronet. And how this works is you'll shoot electronet at someone, and when it hits, you increase your alacrity by 15% for 9 seconds. Which, that's pretty cool. I mean, I'm kiting for my life. I can shoot this at the annoying marauder chasing me, use my knockback so he can't leap to me while my net is on him, and all of a sudden, for 9 seconds, I have a 15% alacrity boost, which, spec'd out as I am in top tier gear, my alacrity is only at 14%. You add 15% on there, my cast times are going to be ridiculously fast. I can get 4 or 5 heals off real quick there with that boost. So it's not only just useful for DPS trying to burn down a Sorc healer, it's extremely useful for a healer who's trying to just save his life there. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below.